Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we are pulling apart a moment in Hollywood history that honestly, it feels almost like a magic trick.
That is probably the best way to describe it, yeah.
Because if you look at it one way, it's just a classic 1930s action movie. You know, loud, fast, incredibly violent, lots of machine guns rattling.
Right.
But if you shift your perspective just a little bit, you realize you are looking at perhaps the single most successful high-stakes PR stunt of the 20th century.
It really is. It's a rebranding exercise so effective that people are still buying into it nearly 100 years later. I mean, it is the exact moment Hollywood decided to stop fighting the government and, well, start marketing it.
We are talking about the 1935 film G-Men. And to really understand the weight of this deep dive, you have to conjure up an image of James Cagney.
Oh, absolutely. Cagney is the whole key to this.
Right, because before this movie, Cagney was essentially the face of the American criminal. He was the guy who, he smashed a grapefruit into a woman's face in The Public Enemy.
Which was shocking at the time.
Totally shocking. He made being bad look dangerous, exciting, and frankly, incredibly cool.
That's the core issue they were dealing with.
Yeah.
He had this electric energy on screen. And then, almost overnight, Warner Brothers decides to take that specific energy, the sneer, the aggression, the street smarts, and just put a federal badge on it.
Right.
G-Men isn't just a movie where Cagney happens to play a cop. It's a movie where Hollywood tries to save its own skin by turning their absolute biggest villain into the ultimate federal agent.
So our mission today is to walk through exactly how this pivot happened. We're going to look at the plot, the production context, and the massive reception of G-Men to understand how Warner Brothers managed to flip the script on the gangster film genre.
And do it without actually changing the formula that made them rich in the first place.
Exactly. And just so you know, we are basing our deep dive today on the Wikipedia article for the film G-Men, which covers all the production notes, the historical context, and the plot summaries.
It's a really fascinating source to dig into.
Let's start with the why. Because studios don't usually mess with a winning formula unless they are absolutely forced to. And the gangster formula in the early 30s was definitely winning.
Oh, it was printing money. But you really have to contextualize the year. We are in the early 1930s. The Great Depression is in full swing.
Things are bleak.
Incredibly bleak.
Yeah.
The national mood is at rock bottom. Unemployment is sky high. And into that void, Warner Brothers is releasing these gritty, hard-hitting films like Little Caesar, the original Scarface, and the big one, The Public Enemy.
Which brings us back to Cagney.
Right. In The Public Enemy, he plays Tom Powers. He's a street tough who rises to the top. Now, here is the nuance that political and business leaders at the time were screaming about. In these movies, the bad guy almost always died at the end.
So the moral of the story was technically there. Crime doesn't pay.
Technically, yes. The crime doesn't pay moral was tacked on. But for the first 89 minutes?
The guy is living the dream.
Exactly. For the entire runtime leading up to that death, the gangster is living like a king. He has the best suits, the fastest cars, the prettiest girls, total freedom.
Which is quite the contrast.
It's a massive contrast. If you are a guy standing at a bread line, unable to feed your family because the system has failed you, looking up at the silver screen and seeing a guy who just takes what he wants, that is incredibly seductive.
So the criticism wasn't just that the movies were violent, it was that they were making the Depression-era audience root for the wrong side.
Precisely. You had political leaders, religious groups, and business leaders basically attacking Hollywood. They claimed the studios were actively glorifying criminals.
But there was a second part to this complaint in the source material, which I think is even more interesting. It wasn't just that the criminals looked cool, it was that the government looked pathetic.
Right. The police were depicted as totally impotent.
The critics actually described the cinematic police forces as derelict and largely absentee fathers.
That's a great quote. And it's true. They were either too slow, too dumb, or too corrupt to stop the bad guys. So Warner Brothers is painted into a corner. They are being told by very powerful people to stop making the movies that keep the lights on.
But they can't just start making, romantic comedies. They have James Cagney under contract. He's not going to do a tap dance routine. Well, actually, he was a great dancer, but that's not what the audience wanted from him.
No, they wanted the tough guy.
They wanted the guy with the gun.
So the studio executives, and we really have to give credit to the sheer strategic brilliance here, decide to execute a massive bait and switch. They said, okay, we will stop glorifying the criminal protagonist. Instead, we will glorify the heroic federal police officer.
They kept the violence, they kept the speed, they kept the big star. They just changed who he was shooting at.
That is G-Men in a nutshell. It was the studio's direct answer to the critics. And the way they constructed the narrative to bridge that gap is what's so fascinating.
Yeah.
Because they didn't just make Cagney a squeaky clean do-gooder from the very first frame.
That would have been too jarring.
The audience wouldn't have bought it at all.
Right, so let's get into the character of James Davis. They call him Brick. When we meet Brick Davis, he isn't a cop. He isn't a criminal either. He's a lawyer.
He is. But he's a very specific type of lawyer. He has absolutely no clients.
Which is usually a pretty bad sign for a lawyer.
In real life, yes.
Yeah.
But in the logic of the movie, it's a sign of virtue. He refuses to compromise his ideals. He won't defend guilty people. He won't play the dirty games of the legal system. He's just sitting in his office with nothing to do because he has too much integrity.
However, and this is the hook that really drags the audience in there, is a shadow over him. We find out pretty early on that his education, his law degree, literally everything he has, was paid for by a man named McKay.
Mac McKay.
Oh.
Who just happens to be a very powerful, very wealthy mob boss.
This dynamic is so interesting to me. You have the ultimate lawman to be, and his primary father figure is a major criminal. It creates this immediate moral gray area. It's not just black and white.
It's the engine of the whole first act. And McKay isn't portrayed as a monster either. He's a benevolent mentor. He saw potential in Davis and wanted him to have a life away from the streets. He essentially groomed Davis to be better than him.
He wanted him on the right side of the law.
Exactly. So Davis is trying to live up to that. He's trying to be a legitimate, clean lawyer. But then his friend enters the picture, Eddie Buchanan.
Right. Eddie is played by Regis Toomey, and Eddie is the recruiter. He's already a federal agent, a G-man. He comes to Davis and says, look, you're starving as a lawyer. Come join the Department of Justice. We need guys like you.
And Davis says no.
Flat out rejects him.
He does. He has zero interest in being a cop.
Yeah.
And this is crucial for the audience's identification with Cagney. If he had just wanted to be a cop from scene one, he would have seemed like a square. By rejecting it initially, he maintains that independence, that edge.
Until the catalyst hits.
Right. The classic tragedy. Eddie Buchanan, the well-meaning friend, tries to arrest a gangster and is killed.
And that is the exact moment the switch flips for Davis. It's not about abstract justice anymore. It's not about upholding the law for the sake of the law. It's about revenge.
Exactly. Davis joins the Department of Justice not to serve the country, but to catch the specific man who killed his friend. It grounds the motivation in something very primal, which fits Cagney's acting style perfectly.
But this decision forces a really heartbreaking scene. He has to go tell McKay, his mobster patron, that he is joining the federal government.
He's joining the other side.
Right. And the source material mentions a woman in the scene, too, Jean Morgan.
Yes, played by Dvorak. She's the star of McKay's nightclub, and it's very clear she has deep feelings for Davis. So Davis is walking away from his father figure and a potential love interest. He's severing his ties with the criminal world to enter the legal world.
But the movie makes it clear the personal connection is still there. He loves these people, even if he hates what they represent.
It's a great conflict. So he packs his bags and heads to Washington, D.C. for training. In this part of the movie, honestly, if you've seen any cop movie from the last 40 years, this sequence will feel incredibly familiar.
It totally set the template. You have the whole boot camp sequence?
And you have the hardened instructor who rides him relentlessly, Jeff McCord, played by Robert Armstrong.
The dynamic is just instant friction. McCord looks at Davis and sees a soft lawyer. He sees a city boy who had his tuition paid for by a mobster. He doesn't think Davis has the grit to be a federal agent.
So he mocks him, he rides him, he tries to get him to quit.
But Davis takes it, which is interesting for a Cagney character. Usually he'd just punch the guy in the nose and walk out.
He swallows his pride, partly because he is so determined to get his friend's killer, but also because, in true Hollywood fashion, he meets McCord's sister.
Of course he does. Kay, played by Margaret Lindsay.
Right, so now the stakes are tripled. He wants the job for revenge, he wants the girl for romance, but the girl's brother is the one man standing in his way. It creates this intense pressure cooker environment during all the training scenes.
Now, while they are doing calisthenics and learning to dust for fingerprints, there is a historical detail in the plot that I found genuinely shocking. I had to double-check the context on this. At the beginning of G-Men, these federal agents, they aren't allowed to carry guns.
It sounds completely insane to a modern audience considering how we view the FBI today, but that is historically accurate. The movie makes a huge plot point out of this. When G-Men starts, the agents are basically just investigators.
They are accountants and lawyers.
Exactly. If they wanted to arrest a violent criminal, they had to get a warrant, go to the local police, and ask the local cops to make the arrest for them.
Which perfectly explains why the critics were calling them impotent. You're chasing guys with Tommy guns, and you have to ask a local sheriff for permission to stop them?
It was a massive handicap. And the film dramatizes this brilliantly. It shows the agents being humiliated, outgunned, and just unable to do their jobs. It builds this incredible frustration in the audience. You're watching and thinking, give these guys a break. Give them some firepower.
And the movie ramps up the threat to justify exactly that. We find out that McKay, the good mobster, if we can call him that, retires. He buys a lodge in Wisconsin to get out of the game. But without him in charge, his old gang goes completely off the rails.
They are entirely off the leash. No code, no restraint, just pure violence.
Yeah.
And the G-Men are powerless to stop it because of these restrictive laws. So we get a scene where the head of the G-Men is literally pleading with the government for new legislation.
And in the movie universe, Congress moves remarkably fast.
Very fast. The laws are enacted with great speed. And suddenly, the dynamic shifts. The agents are armed, they have federal power, they don't need local cops anymore.
It marks the transition from that weak, absentee father figure the critics hated to the powerhouse FBI image we know today.
It's almost like a superhero origin story. They finally get their powers.
It really is. So now Davis is armed, he has his badge, and he is on the hunt. He identifies one of the bad guys, a perpetrator named Danny Leggett. And I really love the detective work here. It's not high-tech surveillance, it's a character quirk.
The gardenia.
Yes. Leggett has this superstition. He always wears a gardenia flower.
It's a great visual shorthand. It allows Davis to track him down through florists and sightings. It shows the audience that these guys are smart detectives, not just thugs with badges. They actually use their brains.
But eventually, they do use the guns. The investigation leads them to Wisconsin, to that exact lodge McKay bought. And this is where all the plot threads, the personal, the professional, the revenge, just smash together.
The gang is hiding out at McKay's lodge. And it's important to note, they are there against McKay's will. He's retired. He doesn't want them there. But they've taken over his place.
Davis and the G-Men surround the lodge, and we get the big shootout. This is the climax of the second act. And it ends in a tragedy that I think gives the movie its real moral weight.
It does. In the chaos of the raid, the villains use McKay as a human shield. And Davis, in the heat of the battle, he shoots. And he hits McKay.
He kills the man who paid for his law school, the man who is practically a father to him.
It is devastating. Davis is absolutely distraught. But the movie needs to absolve him, so we get a deathbed scene. McKay, as he's dying, forgives Davis. He tells him it's okay.
That feels like a very symbolic moment. The old way, the benevolent criminal has to die for the new way, the federal agent to fully emerge.
That's a really great reading of it. He clears the board. Davis is no longer beholden to the criminal world in any way. But the guilt is heavy. He actually tries to quit the force right there.
He's done. He feels he can't take it. But then we get the turn from McCord, the instructor who hated him.
This is the big bonding moment. McCord steps up. He tells Davis it wasn't his fault. He talks him out of quitting. They move from being enemies to being brothers in arms. The shared tragedy solidifies their partnership.
Which they're going to need, because one bad guy got away from the lodge. Collins. And Collins is the worst of the bunch.
He is the purely evil antagonist. And now that his crew is decimated, he makes it intensely personal. He goes after the women in Davis's life.
First, he goes to the nightclub.
Right. He finds Jean, the singer who was in love with Davis, and he shoots her.
Then he goes for Kay, the love interest, and kidnaps her.
Meanwhile, Davis is actually in the hospital. He took a bullet earlier in the action, and specifically, he took a bullet that was meant for McCord.
Which cements the bromance even further. He saved his former enemy's life.
Exactly. So he's lying in a hospital bed, wounded, bandaged up. But then the news comes in that Kay has been taken.
I love the cinematic trope, the ripping out the IVs scene.
It's classic. He doesn't care what the doctors say. He bolts. He runs out of the hospital, bandage and all.
Yeah.
He actually manages to have a final scene with the dying Jean, which gives us closure on that relationship before heading to the garage where Collins is hiding.
It's the final showdown. Davis rescues Kay from the garage. Collins is trying to get away in a car. And who takes the final shot?
It isn't Davis. It's McCord. The instructor shoots the villain as he tries to drive off. It brings the whole narrative arc full circle. The rookie and the veteran, the lawyer and the cop, working together to end the threat.
And we get the neat Hollywood wrap-up. The bad guys are dead. The girl is safe. And Kay is driving the wounded Davis back to the hospital.
And she drops that great line, "I'll handle your case personally."
Very smooth. So the credits roll, the lights come up, and Warner Brothers holds its breath. Did the gamble work? Did the audience buy James Cagney as a federal cop?
The numbers speak for themselves. G-Men wasn't just a hit. It was a phenomenon. It was one of the top grossing films of 1935. It brought in nearly $2 million globally.
$2 million in 1935. That's hard to even calculate in today's money, but for a budget of, what was it?
The budget was around $307,000, so the return on investment was massive. Warner Brothers proved their point. They satisfied the audiences who wanted action and violence, but they also completely satisfied the censors and the politicians who wanted law and order.
They essentially legitimized the action movie.
They wrapped the violence in the flag, and by doing that, they secured the genre's future.
Now, we mentioned the PR stunt aspect at the very beginning of the deep dive, but there is a detail in the reception history from the source that takes this to a whole new level. It involves the FBI itself.
This is where the line between Hollywood and history gets really blurry. So the movie comes out in 1935. It's a huge hit. Fast forward to 1949. The FBI is celebrating its 25th anniversary. To mark the occasion, G-Men is re-released in theaters.
Okay, a re-release. That's standard practice.
But it's not just a re-release. They altered the film. They added a prologue. They filmed a brand new scene depicting a senior FBI agent showing the movie G-Men to a group of recruits.
Wait, so they framed the Hollywood movie as a literal training video?
Essentially, yes. The framing was, sit down rookies, watch this film to learn the history of how our bureau was formed. The PR stunt became official lore. The FBI embraced the myth-making completely.
That is wild. It shows how much the Bureau valued this specific portrayal. They didn't say, oh, that's just a movie. They said, that's our story.
It definitely helped that the screenplay had some heavy hitters behind it.
Yeah.
It was partially written by Darryl F. Zanuck, though he went uncredited, and it was based on a story called Public Enemy No. 1. It was crafted from the ground up to be this mythic narrative.
We should also give a quick nod to the supporting cast, because it wasn't just Cagney doing all the heavy lifting.
Oh, absolutely. We mentioned Regis Toomey as the doomed friend Eddie, but we also have Lloyd Nolan making his film debut here. The casting was top-notch. It gave the film a gravitas that elevated it far above a cheap B-movie.
And clearly the quality held up over time, because I saw in the notes that in 2008, the American Film Institute gave it a nod.
They nominated G-Men for their top 10 gangster films list, which is deeply ironic if you think about it.
Because it was explicitly made to counter the gangster film.
Exactly. It was the anti-gangster movie. But it used the language of those films, the slang, the pacing, the violence so effectively that history has essentially grouped it in with the very movies it was trying to destroy.
So when we look back at G-Men, what is the big takeaway here? We have a studio under immense pressure, a star known for playing criminals, and a government agency that desperately needed a win.
It's a masterclass in adaptation. Warner Brothers realized they couldn't fight the tide of public opinion, so they surfed it. They proved that you didn't have to stop showing violence to appease the moral guardians. You just had to make sure the violence was being committed by the right people.
It's all about the target.
It is. And in doing so, they likely did more for the public image of the FBI than any actual news report, press release, or recruitment drive ever could. They made the G-Man cool.
Which brings us to the end of our deep dive. But before we let you go, here is something I want you to mull over. This movie ends with the good guys winning, but only after the laws are changed to give them more power, more weapons, and less oversight.
Right. The handcuffs are taken off the agents.
Considering G-Men was essentially a blockbuster PR campaign for the FBI, it makes you wonder, how much of our actual perception of government authority, what we think they can do, and more importantly, what we think they should do, was shaped not by a civics textbook, but by a movie studio just trying to protect its bottom line?
It's a powerful question. Cinema doesn't just reflect history. Sometimes it helps write it.
Thanks for listening. We'll catch you on the next deep dive.